Hey, it's Nick here, and we're back at it again with another weird print. And so what I'm showing you right now isn't the finished print, but kind of the failed prototype that I was trying to make. And so I figured it'd be easier to show you this rather than just kind of string you along to try and guess what I'm trying to make. And so it's just gonna be kind of a window, and then it's me sleeping on the couch, and I've got some astronauts in the back. And I've been very curious about the idea of playing with windows in artwork and kind of creating a multi-layered print. And so I'm finally kind of experimenting with that. So first up comes the lino cut window. And so I kind of modeled this window to sort of look like an exhibit you might see at a zoo or something, because the idea behind this print is kind of exploring that weird feeling that I get by putting my kind of artistic process on display for everyone to see. And if you've ever worked with me in the studio, you might know that a lot of my artistic process involves me napping on a couch because I'm in the studio for so long. But it's a weirdly important part of my artistic process, alright? Sometimes when I'm just laying on the couch, just kind of dreaming and resting, that's when I get my ideas for prints. And so that's kind of three little astronauts coming in my dreams to give me inspiration for my next idea. So here I am, carving some bricks. A brick carving tip for you. I think it's nice to make them not too uniform. I kind of vary the spacing between the bricks, and I like to clip off two opposing corners of the bricks, because bricks aren't, perfectly rectangular in real life, and it kind of gives them a small sense of depth. I don't know, I feel like it's a small detail, and it kind of takes a little bit extra work, but I think it makes it look a lot better than the bare minimum kind of brick pattern. Next up, it's time to finally print this block. And so I'm just going to go ahead and tape my block to the press bed. This is a fun little trick if you have the press all to yourself to kind of speed up the flow of things if I don't have to take the block back and forth. And I'm just going to print in your bog standard black ink, and of course it's going to be chock full of dryer. Anything that I really plan to be handled in any sort of way, I like to go ahead and put some dryer into it. And so this one's just kind of a drop and pray method, and it is a bleed print, so I'm going to go ahead and put a sacrificial sheet of paper over top of it so I don't get ink onto my felts. And I'm going to go ahead and send it through the press. And you may have noticed that I haven't really talked about the specifics of how to recreate this, or with the measurements and all that stuff. And to be honest, this entire process I'm just kind of winging it, and so I didn't really plan it out very well, and so that's why I don't really have much advice for you if you're going to try and recreate this one. This project's been full of disappointments and mistakes. It was going to be all lino cuts, all drop and prayed, but that didn't quite work out right. I forgot to reverse a whole bunch of things. You might have seen me at the beginning carving 3 slots at the bottom underneath this window for the title, edition, and signature, but I forgot to reverse it, and so now I just have one big line underneath. But hey, there's the window, it's done. So let's move on to the next piece. What I ultimately decided on to fix the piece from the prototype you saw in the beginning was that it needed color to kind of improve the contrast and the readability of the image, and so the composition could just kind of flow better, because it was just kind of one big muddled black and white mess. And so I'm going to use some pronto plates for some polyester plate lithography. If you don't know what pronto plates are, they're kind of sheets of mylar coated in polyester, I think, that you can draw on and kind of do a quick turnaround litho print with. But now that I'm doing multiple colors, I'm going to need some registration. So here I am punching some holes into these pronto plates, and I'm going to have to add some tabs for some holes onto my prints that I've already printed, because I didn't plan for this color piece to come until after I printed all of the lino cut layers. And adding pin registration after I've already printed my first layer definitely led to some tolerance issues down the line, and so let this be a lesson to you. Always think of your registration beforehand. But I'm making the best of my situation here. And one of my favorite things about polyester plates is that you can kind of see through them. And so here I kind of have some of my astronauts that I printed from the octafold canister thing that I did a few weeks back. And I'm using those prints as a guide for this drawing right here. And the nice thing about polyester plate litho is you can use ballpoint pens and Sharpies. And so it's a very direct kind of drawing method. And when I draw these, I like to keep it pretty loose, kind of embracing that kind of messiness and making sure, it kind of looks like a ballpoint pen drawing or a Sharpie drawing. And when it comes to the color separation, you can just kind of stack plates on top of each other. And so here I have the original drawing plate underneath this one, and I can just kind of use that as an outline for the next drawing, or this color layer. And then here I am onto the third color layer, and creating color separations is just as easy as that. Just stacking sheets of polyester plates. And it's also nice that they're less than $1 each, and I can get them at the local Dick Blick. The real trickiness starts when you try to print them. So when I print pronto plates, I like to mix up a little bit of fountain solution, and so I'm going to take about 8 ounces of water and half an ounce of this pink universal fountain solution, which is basically just going to help me stop scumming when I print. And I'm going to ink up with a nice yellow to kind of orangish blend roll. I'm a big fan of the nice warm colors. And here I'm going to realize my mistake again, that I forgot to reverse it. You'd think I'd learn after like the 4th time of reversing my image, kind of biting me in the butt. And so my astronauts would be upside down, and so I need my pins on the left side. So I'm going to kind of mark where the edge of the paper would be if the pins were on that side, and then I'm going to stack up my layers, and then I'm going to go ahead and chop them off at the same time, and then punch some new holes. After setting it back up on the press, I can finally print it. Now, because I put on these registration tabs after I already printed the first layer, there was a little bit of inconsistency where it landed. I often had this layer kind of overlapping some of the bricks on the front layer. You know, it's supposed to be kind of meeting right at that kind of a crease intersection. But we're going to work with what we've got here. Next up is the color layers for the astronaut suits. I don't want them to be like stark white, you know, like paper white. And so I kind of had this nice light blue to kind of a mid-tone blue kind of gradient going down the astronaut suits. Just kind of push them a little bit farther back into the background and, you know, make them feel a bit more floaty, spacey background characters. And honestly, they kind of look pretty nice right now. They're very ominous silhouettes. But let's do one more layer. And I tried a bunch of different colors for this outline layer. I knew I didn't want it to be straight black because that'd probably be a little bit too dark, but I ended up going with a little bit of Prussian blue and a touch of black to just kind of opaque it up a little bit. My Daniel Smith Prussian blue was a little bit transparent, and overall I think it looks great. Over the astronauts, it makes a nice fine kind of bluish outline, but when it overlaps with the orange, you know, the blue and the orange kind of cancel out, and it gives me this really like nice dark black looking kind of ink, kind of like the rising above a black hole. Next up, it's time to make an image of me sleeping on the couch. Luckily, this wasn't hard to get, as pretty much anyone who's ever lived with me or worked with me has many images of me sleeping. And weirdly enough, this is like the one image I did remember to reverse. And so, enjoy me sleeping on the couch with a blanket on, and I wanted it to be a little bit differentiated between like me and the couch, you know, put some color in somewhere, but I don't want to color the whole thing because I feel like I might be lost in the sea of line work. And so I decided to make a color layer just for me and the blanket to kind of differentiate myself from this couch. So the astronauts have a kind of a warm color scheme going on, and so I decided to give myself a bit of a colder color scheme to help contrast myself from the background and the foreground. And so we're going from this nice light blue to a bit of a violet color, and of course I didn't want it to be too dark because it would fight the line work. And so we've got this gentle blend going in on a diagonal, and there we go. And so let's put some line work on this bad boy. First, I'm going to start off with a little bit of graphic chemical purple, and I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine to make it like, you know, a nice colder violet color. Looking back on it, I just realized that I just kind of went and made ballpoint ink color again. And you know, it kind of looks like a ballpoint pen drawing. But you know, I still think it's pretty cool. There's a little bit of white gap at the bottom, but I think that's just me not planning it out so well. I'll probably take a Sharpie to the plate and just kind of build in a little bit more trapping. Alright, let's go ahead and put this together, and honestly, it's somewhat of a miracle that this works. I'm just going to go ahead and remove off this tab, so we won't be needing it anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with cutting out this first window right here. And making these little beams up at the top was honestly a terrible decision. It is like the worst thing to cut out. I wish I just made it a straight window across, but I guess it's a little bit too late for that now. And so, with that out of the way, after a little bit of cleanup, there's our window. And now it's time to kind of crease this up. And so I'm just going to kind of crease it where I think that line should be. I'm going to use up the grid on my cutting mat to kind of help line up the ruler and try to make this about as perpendicular as possible. If I had a registration guide from the very beginning, I could probably set up a jig to help me do this faster, easier, and better. But since I didn't, I kind of freehanded all of these. I'm just going to have to do this by eye every single time. And so I'm going to do creases there, where the window kind of folds around, and one right here at the very edge. And so that'll give me just kind of the main folds for this window. And then whatever excess that I have right there, I'm just basically going to fold that in, and that's just going to be my glue down tab. Which you can see, it doesn't perfectly land up where the image is, but that's because I added on the registration system afterwards. It's not too far off. Next up, just cut out that image of me on the couch. And so tape tab off, and then I'm just going to go ahead, since I don't need basically anything in the top, I'm going to go ahead and cut away the entire top half of this image. I realized I didn't need quite a big sheet of paper if I was going to cut away this much of it. Now, the one thing I did plan about this image is that on one half of this tab, it's going to be folded 1/2 of an inch, and the other side is going to be folded 1 full inch. And that's because the depth of the diorama is about 1.5 inches, and so that way it can be spaced kind of perfectly 1 inch from the back and 1/2 inch from the front, which will kind of self-align itself about 2/3 of the way through this diorama. And so I'm just going to put down some glue, fold it over, make sure that it is kind of lined up with the bottom. And there's 1/2 of it down. I'm going to go ahead and glue up the other half, and that's going to basically glue onto the front half of the other side of this diorama. So the spacing kind of works out like that. And then once that glue is firmly in place, we're going to go ahead and put on some glue onto this tab, and then just kind of stick it into place. And then I'm going to fold it down flat to make sure that it's going to fit flat, because that's kind of like the end goal, is that it gets to sit flat. So, how did it turn out? Well, here's the finished product. A nice diorama that fits inside of an envelope, easily mailed, and it folds out into 3 dimensions, creating a nice little space where it gets to be separated from you, the viewer. It's kind of a very small, intimate moment between these figures that you as an onlooker just only get to experience by looking through to it. I don't know, it gives a nice sense of removal. The window is a cool theme that I might keep exploring in my works. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time. See ya! Haha, look who fell asleep first. Yeah, prank him, John.